Now, this afternoon, we turn to the heart of the diplomatic storm as Kyiv signals readiness to engage on the revised US framework and Washington prepares its next moves. Questions swirl about the path to a political settlement. With battlefield pressures, leaked documents, and the influence of Moscow's non-paper shaping every decision, we explore what comes next. And to help us navigate this complex landscape, we are joined from Kyiv by Oleksiy Melnyk, a former Ukrainian deputy defense minister. And from Washington, we are joined by Rene, who is a political researcher. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us here on Qnews. Thank you very much for being here. Oleksiy Melnyk, I'll start with you. Reuters reported that Kyiv is now prepared to advance the revised framework. What's your view on this?
Good afternoon, and thank you for having me. Kyiv has a very difficult task nowadays, and on the one hand, with very careful statements, trying not to disappoint Donald Trump, at the same time to protect or to respect the red lines for Ukraine that cannot be crossed at any chance. Because even if President Zelensky is forced to accept these compromises, then he should be very careful at what kind of compromises he, using Trump's vocabulary, can sell to the Ukrainian people. Because the reaction if we talk about these territorial concessions, for instance, will be quite predictable. It will be very angry reactions. It will not be accepted in Ukraine. And I just am afraid to speculate what kind of situation we will have inside here, what kind of internal crisis.
Okay, I'll come to you now, Rene. From the Washington point of view, were they right to revise this 28-point plan?
Well, I think that what we have to look at here is the unfortunately the harsh reality of what we're seeing right now. Continuing this war indefinitely is not in anyone's best interest. I mean, this is peace is in everyone's long-term best interest. Ukraine is carrying an enormous human, financial, infrastructure burdens. Russia is running out of money. Europe is strained economically. The United States, I mean, the folks here are running out of patience in terms of funding another endless war. So all of these strategic challenges are kind of presenting themselves at the same time. And so if we can do what President Trump was hoping to do on day one, which is end the war, we're still obviously in the first year. I mean, we are getting closer here. The conversation is one that I see as being a productive one. We're talking about the pathway to peace. We're talking about what it's going to take to find a solution to this conflict. And I don't think it's going to be a win for Ukraine. I don't think it's going to be a win for Russia. I think in situations like this, everyone loses. But there are certain red lines that I think need to be respected, both for Ukraine in terms of its territory, but also to ensure that Russia's aggression is not rewarded here. We need to be very careful that if we get peace here as part of this agreement, that it isn't just something that we come back in 6 months or a year from now and are facing the same thing all over again. There has to be security guarantees for any type of concessions that come forward here. Yes. And any peace has to be a real peace. And the only people who can really agree to this are Kiev and Moscow.
Okay, and Oleksiy Melnyk, coming to you. Zelensky says Ukraine will discuss sensitive points, as he puts it, with President Trump directly. What are these sensitive points, would you say? What are the red lines that Kyiv needs to not cross?
I think, first of all, it is related to the Russian demands that Ukraine has to withdraw its troops from the territories that are still under Ukrainian government's control. And it's a huge territory, and there are about 250,000 of Ukrainians on these territories. So it's not just about square kilometers of land, it's also about Ukrainian citizens to be whatever handed over under Russian control. So this is obviously the most sensitive question, and President Zelensky or Ukrainian delegation has to explain why it is not possible. Second, I think it's about other requirements that is supposed to be imposed on Ukraine, like limits on the armed forces. And it's not about numbers. It's just the wrong approach to the country which is the victim of the military aggression, and other limits like long-range weapons. So Ukraine didn't attack Russia in 2022, and why Ukraine should be punished restricted in its right for self-defense. I think that this is just a few of sensitive questions, but the most sensitive question is that Ukraine should not be asked whether Ukraine wants peace. From the day one, after the Russian aggression, Ukraine was trying to stop this war. And I fully agree with the previous speaker that nobody wins this war. But why should we, do any favor for Russia, help Putin to save his face? He has to pay a price.
Yes, staying with you, Oleksiy, Moscow, of course, is demanding that Ukraine withdraw from, as they put it, contested areas, so that progress can be made in the talks. That sounds like quite a red line as well, is it not?
That's a red line, but I don't think why should anyone discuss the Russian red lines. I mean, obviously, at a certain moment, some concessions like Ukrainian commitments not to try to get back the territories by force. That's something that very sensitive but can be discussed. But again, Russia violated, President Putin violated all the international conventions. They destroyed the international security post-war to international security architecture. And this is something that should be kind of in the title of the peace plan. And then all the following statements should be aimed at establishing long-lasting peace and preventing another aggression. That's how I see personally what could be kind of right approach to the peace process.
Now, I know we've got to lose you in a minute, Oleksiy, so I'll ask you another question. In Kyiv, what's the feeling? Has it dawned on people? Is it a matter of fact with people that eventually, to end this war, you're going to have to give up parts of Ukraine territory and give it to Russia? Is that something that people think in Kyiv?
No, what I hear from, there is very hot public discussion in the media, and actually I haven't heard any kind of respected source that would suggest that, Ukraine needs to sacrifice the territories, we can't do any more, we cannot hold this, all the difficulties, especially when the harsh winter is coming, electricity is cutting off from time to time. No, the Ukrainian people has paid enormous price for, even for the situation where we are now, we are still resisting. And the Russian progress on the front line is under the big question. I mean, Ukrainian losses definitely are, but what Russia gains, this is the big question. That's why I think Ukraine in general, Ukrainians are not ready to accept such unacceptable compromises. We will see.
And are you happy?
Let me add one more point.
Yes, of course.
I think there is another player that already suffered the biggest damage. This is the authority. This is the power of the United States government. I emphasize not just the United States as the nation, but the current administration. And this is where Ukrainians are very disappointed, and this is Ukrainians have very huge concerns. Again, not about the United States of America as such, but about the current administration and especially representatives like Steve Witkoff.
And Dan Rene, that's a good point to bring you back in. Are Ukrainians right to be concerned and disappointed by the Trump administration?
Well, I think that they should be concerned and disappointed by the entire situation. However, I do think that the conversations that we're having at this point are productive. I mean, if we are talking about ways to try to find a way to bring about an end to the fighting, those are all conversations that should be considered and embraced. And I do wish that Moscow has been participating the same way that Ukraine has. I mean, Ukraine and the United States are both eager to find a pathway to peace. And it seems like every time there's a conversation about peace, we're seeing more and more aggression from Moscow. So I don't think that we've seen the same interest in finding a diplomatic pathway forward from Moscow. And, let's be real here. A peace is not just the absence of fighting. It's essential to recognize what can go wrong here. And I think the reason why we're having progress made right now is because the initial conversations were centering around things that Moscow was demanding. I don't think Moscow is going to get everything that they want, and well, they shouldn't. Because again, like was pointed out before, they are the aggressor here and they should not be rewarded, because what we cannot have is a precedent that's been set that you can get what you want through brute force in this world. It doesn't work that way anymore. And so, I mean, Kiev, I'm sure, needs and wants to have a lasting peace here. But this should not be an opportunity to find a way to stop the fighting, allow Russia to regroup and come back in and start things all over again. This has to come with some enforceable guarantees. It has to come with some credible monitoring and accountability from the global scale. Otherwise, we just kind of risk freezing the conflict where it is right now, and it's just going to erupt again with more destruction, more loss of life, more problems that exist at this point. And the president knows this. Steve Witkoff knows this. They all know that this is a serious situation, and one that not only is it the United States' credibility, but human lives are at stake here. Thousands and thousands are lost every day. And again, we need to figure out a way not only to bring an end to the fighting, but bring an end to the conflict. And that means cooperation from the people that have not necessarily been cooperative to this point.
Look, but Dan, of course, you're an old school Republican, a pre-Trump Republican of old. Sure. Are you slightly ashamed of your party, your leadership, for the supine way they have been towards Russia, and this leaked audio of Steve Witkoff? That can't really play to your Republican core, can it?
Well, I don't think that anyone will like the way the sausage is made here in terms of finding a pathway to peace, and absolutely. I mean, no one can deny that kind of cozying up to someone that's been the aggressor here is something that we can all say is good or productive. But at the same time, strategically, I do see this as a pathway that got Russia, at least Putin, to the table to start considering some of these options for a viable, sustained peace. And so what was discussed and what was leaked and presented in this situation certainly was one where we were talking to Russia about these things. But again, these are ways to get the conversation started, to get the diplomacy underway, to find a pathway to at least have the conversations that can lead to this lasting peace.
Okay.
Yeah, keep in mind, this was the initial start to the conversation to bring people to the table, not a finalized agreement that we're talking about here. So, yeah,
Okay.
it
I
is
just
a bit.
Alexei's got to leave us, Dan. So I'll just leave
Sure.
you for a
Okay.
second.
Yep.
Oleksiy Melnyk, are you happy with the current 19-point version of this plan?
Well, then I can stay another 10 minutes with you. That's fine.
Okay. Okay.
Now we actually don't know how many points been left, because initially there were 28, then there was information about 19 points, and just before we started our conversation, I saw some reports from the Europeans that they have actually no information about the current version of the so-called peace plan, which is not, of course, plan, even not a draft plan. And I think this is another bad signal that Ukraine now is isolated by the US administration from the European partners of Ukraine. So since Ukraine is not, the US administration doesn't share or doesn't talk to Europeans, and Ukrainians probably are not allowed to share the progress of the negotiations. And I think this is a very bad approach. And every time Dan said about strategy, this is not the strategy. This is not even tactics. This is just, deal making, which has nothing to do with the long-lasting peace. And I'm absolutely sure that the first step, which could be in a strategic direction, and the only demand for the both sides should be now to stop the war, to achieve a ceasefire. And this is possible, if not complete ceasefire, partial ceasefire, and then, the next step is negotiations about possible compromises or trying to find some kind of common interests. And so the ceasefire should be the first step.
Okay, Dan, Rene, I mean, is that right, that ceasefire first? I mean, it seems that Washington wants a comprehensive peace deal and then sort out the details and the security guarantees later on. Is this so that Trump can add it to the list of 10,000 wars that he's ended since the start of his administration?
Right. So, yeah. I mean, again, I agree with what's being said here, but cautiously. I would think that when Trump and Putin were meeting in Alaska, that would have been a ceasefire during that. But even when those gentlemen were talking, there were drone attacks that were happening in Ukraine. I really see a worst case scenario here where the negotiations, if they do fail, Russia is just going to continue its pursuits to rearm and launch new aggression. So I do think that there needs to be, in addition to a ceasefire, at least a pathway towards peace that can maintain the credibility of the United States, the credibility of Ukraine. Obviously, Russia is looking for something where they can go back. Putin has to go back to his people with something other than a loss here. Again, I don't think anyone necessarily likes that, but that's the real world situation that we're looking at. And to the other point about Europe not being involved, I think that the European leaders were at the G20 in Africa here just last week, kind of talking about their role in this as well. They've got to put a lot of money up for Ukraine's defense as well in this situation. They're right there in the neighborhood, if you will. And so, what the phases that we're entering here, a ceasefire is incredibly important. But there also has to be pressure on finding a pathway toward a lasting peace. Otherwise, all this ceasefire is going to do is going to re-energize the aggressor here. And we're going to see more fighting, and it's going to be a more fragile situation and one where we're going to see more loss of life. And that's exactly what the United States is trying to prevent at this point.
Oleksiy Melnyk, coming to you. Ukrainian commanders warn that the battlefield dynamics could shift rapidly. How important to the ceasefire, to the talks, to any potential peace plan is the military situation?
Military situation has been critical, I would say, probably for the rest of this year or even for the last 2 years. But still, Ukraine is able to resist. Ukrainian forces are still able to resist Russian advance, and it's like a speed of maybe 5 kilometers per month if we see the whole line. So this is not the real progress. There is from the Russian side not any operational breakthrough. However, when we insist on a ceasefire, we do understand that ceasefire doesn't mean peace. Ceasefire is the first step for the start of the real negotiations, and the most important in Moscow's case, that Moscow should make something practical to signal that Moscow is ready for negotiations. And there is another interesting issue about possible ceasefire, that both sides under the current situation of actually no trust, zero trust, that both sides are afraid of this ceasefire because the same concern that the other side will use the opportunity to regroup, to rearm, and start fighting immediately after, or maybe even breaking the ceasefire.
And Dan, Rene, what should we expect of this upcoming trip of Steve Witkoff's to Moscow? Is it going to reshape the diplomatic map?
I hope so. I hope that we get towards a pathway. Again, these conversations are exactly the conversations that we need to be having, that can actually bring forward something that can be a productive and lasting peace, that can bring about an end to this horrible situation that we've seen for the last several years. However, as optimistic as we're hearing our leaders at this point about making these breakthroughs, Moscow still has to be interested in a peace, and until this original point plan that came out that was seemingly favorable to Moscow, we didn't really see a whole lot of signals that they were interested in peace. We've seen them time and time again where they haven't been serious, and I think that the meeting in Alaska was one where we had a lot of optimism that just turned out to be another optics or another PR play by Putin. And I think that when we were talking about the Tomahawk missiles, and there was another call from Putin to the White House, where we saw that as another almost diplomatic failure, if you will, in terms of bringing about peace. But Putin and Russia have to show that they're serious here, and I do hope that this is one where they are serious, because again, they have to be fatigued. Russia's running out of money and troops too.
Yeah. And Oleksiy, last 20 seconds to you. Are you hopeful for some kind of ceasefire in the coming days and weeks?
I would say there is a possibility, very low, but still, and a lot depends on the Trump's position. Actually, Donald Trump today is probably the only person that Putin here. When Donald Trump says that Russia is a paper tiger, that this war is senseless, and this is the only probably source of the true information that can reach Putin's ears nowadays.
And Dan, ceasefire, 30 seconds left. Is it going to happen?
I hope so, but in addition to a ceasefire, I hope that we're on a pathway to a lasting peace that can work for everyone and work for the world.
Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us here on the program. Oleksiy Melnyk from Kyiv and Dan Rene in Washington, thank you very much for joining us here on Q News.